Hey guys, so today we're going to be working on assemblies. So we've already kind of started building multiple pieces into what would be called an assembly, but so far we've been staying mainly with the bodies. So when you created your components or your primitives, when you extruded it, I told you to make as bodies. That's kind of the easiest way to do it starting. There's also another option for a component. So today we'll talk about the difference between those two things. So a body, if you look down here, I have the bodies here, and I have the list of all these different pieces, and if I click on them, it'll highlight which one they are. Those are individual pieces of 3D geometry, and they're symbolized by the cylinder icon. A component, it has a symbol of this cube, and it's a group of either bodies or bodies and components, or components, which then those other components have bodies within them. And so that's kind of the difference. So a component is a grouping of bodies and or components. A body is the actual piece of 3D geometry. So up until now, when we wanted to move things around and kind of line stuff up, we were using the move tool. So if I wanted to put this box on top of this box, I'd have to use the move tool, grab it, and then kind of bring it over and try and line it up manually. Or if I went over and found the point to point, I could grab that and then say this point to that point, and I could go back to move it around if I wanted to or whatever. So that was one way of doing it so far. When I made these boxes, I made one and I copied it over a couple times. But if I change one of these boxes, it doesn't change the other two. What if I wanted these are all supposed to be the same box, just different copies of it. I want them to all change together. Having everything be as body, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this box, right click, and say create components from the body. And so now if I scroll down, all the way down, I have a component called box, and it moved that body into that component. Okay, so you see that down there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go up here. I'm going to grab those other two boxes, and you can see it, box 1, 2. I'm just going to erase those two boxes. And now I'm going to take this box. I'm going to go move here. I'm just going to tell it create a copy. Put one there. Move. Oops. I was moving the body. That's not what I wanted. I want to move the component of that and create a copy over here. And I'll do it again. Move the component, create a copy, put it there. And now what happens when I change this body? If I change this body, all three of them change. So that's a good benefit of having components, because now if I scroll down here, I look, there's box 1, box 1, 2, box 1, 3. That means it's box 1, instance 1, 2, and 3. And within each one of those, there's the body with the exact same name. So this does a couple of things for us. First, by having components instead of individual pieces of individual bodies, the computer's only having to remember all the details for the geometry once in this component. So it remembers all the body right here, and then it's just telling it use it here, here, and here. So it's saving memory and it's going to make everything run faster, because it's not having to memorize all the little details 3 different times, and you don't have to change it 3 times. You just change it once and it updates everywhere. So that's a good reason for it. Another one is that it updates like that. And also now I can just grab them and I can move these things around, because they're not cemented where they are. So bodies, you can't drag. So if it's just a body under the main component, you can't change it. Oh, look, the icon changed. So now it's 3 boxes, because now this component has another component within it. So its icon changes. If I go down to here, I can look here and see that, okay, those are just there. But now this body is stuck in place related to this component. And each component does have its own origin. It just happens to line up with the origin of of how it was created. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those off again. But now if I want to make some more changes to these, I could do that and they would all update. So I could do the same thing here. Go into bodies, turn that one off, turn that one off, make that a new component. And I can just move components, create a copy, move component, create a copy. Next week we'll find some easier ways to make multiple copies of things. And I can do other things. So like this top piece here, I could right click on that, create a component. I could right click on, I can grab that one piece there, create a component. So I can go through and start creating components of things like that. Once I have components, now those are not stuck anymore. They can move around. The different things that I actually made into components. I'm not going to go ahead and do everything just because I'm kind of showing you the basics right now. But in a real drawing, I'd want those to be components. So as I'm creating things, I wouldn't create them as bodies. If I knew this was going to be an assembly, I'd create them as components so it was all done already. So if I wanted to rename this, I could just name this top, side, whatever. Okay. If I have something that I want to stay locked in place, so I want this top to stay there no matter what, I can right click on it and hit ground. So actually I'm going to get into another file here. So I'm just going to do a new drawing so we can kind of start scratch. And so I'm going to create a box. And I'm going to make it, I don't know, 4 by 5 by ½ inch. And I'm going to tell it to be a new component. Boom. So right now this thing can move around. If I undo, it goes back. And so that's where that component drag is. If I turn that off, I can't drag that. So if you can't drag it, turn on component drag, and now you can drag stuff around. As long as it's a component that's not stuck somewhere. So I want this component to stay here, so I'm going to right click and say ground. So now you can see the little push pin. Now I can't drag this, it's stuck there. So now if I create another box, say I want to put it up here. I'm not going to create it lined up exactly where I want it, I'm just going to kind of create it somewhere else. And I want to make this move to go there. Oops, I didn't make it a component, crap. Right click, create components from body, and there it is. So now this one moves around. And maybe do another one. So I'm purposely making these not lined up because I want to move them to where they want to be. So I'm going to say new component. All right. So this moves, that doesn't move. All right. So now I'm going to use these joints. So under this assemble, I've got some options. I've got new components, so I can just make a blank component that I can then drag other components or bodies into. I can make a joint. I can do a joint origin. I can do a rigid group. So like that desk, I drew everything where it's supposed to be, and it's not going to move. I can make it into a rigid group. I can turn on contact sets, and so that means that when I move things, it'll automatically stop when it hits something else. And joint origins let me pick a new origin, and so you'll kind of see what that means in a minute. So if I wanted to put this to there, I'm going to use the joint command. So I'm going to click joint, And you see this one went away. It went transparent because that component is already grounded. It can't move. So I can't pick anything. So the first thing you pick is the thing that's going to move. So I'm going to move my mouse over here, and you can see it'll highlight that face, and I'll get the little there's little marks at the corners and at the midpoints of the edges and the center of the face. And those are the default joint origins. If I move on this edge, it'll highlight the edge, and I can snap to the end or the middle or there as a point origin. Also look at the direction of that circle with the kind of the circle with the cutout semicircle in it. That changes based on which face I'm on. And so when you make a joint, so you can see it's this icon here. What's going to happen is when we make a joint, we'll have two of those circles, one on each part, and it's going to make those two circles, like they might be this way, and then it's going to make them join together. The side that's got the empty part is going to line up with the side that has the empty part, like that. I could also do just a joint between two faces, so I can do that, or at an intersection of two edges. But if I know I want, let's say I want this to stick out a 1/4 inch from there. So then I can go in joint origin, pick here, and drag it back a 1/4 inch. So now I've got that origin there. So now when I go to joint, I could pick that joint, and I can move over, and I can pick that face, kind of in that circle the same spot, and it's going to try and flip it. I flip it there. Oh, actually probably should have put on the other corner, because if I wanted to overlap. So I want to cancel that, and I'm going to erase that one. I'll put it on this face. I'll go back 2.5. So now I can do the joint from that joint origin to there, and there it's locked in. So if I knew already that that's how I wanted to line up, I could do that ahead of time. I could also, instead of using the joint origin, I could just do a joint from that corner to that corner, because I want those two corners to line up. Sometimes it does that, you have to flip it. Sometimes you might have to rotate things. That's fine. But if I wanted that to stick out a 1/4 inch, I could just click on this arrow and give it a 1/4 inch. So that's another way I could do this. Okay, so, and that's what we call a rigid joint. So you can see the icon here, it's a rigid joint. If I right click on that and say edit joint, I can look at it, and so you can see kind of all the information about it. There's also this tab called motion. So if I click on there, this is going to give me some options about if I want these two things to be able to move. So the first option is rigid, means they're locked solid. However you line them up, they're stuck there. So it's like you glued them together. We have Revolute, which allows the joint to rotate. So you can see there. And you can pick which axis you want to rotate around. So under the z-axis, it's going to automatically, whichever kind of the shape of the circle, it's going to revolve around that circle from the joint icon. So that's there. You have slider joints, which now slide kind of perpendicular to where that circle would be. If that's the z-axis, you can also tell it to slide on the other two axes also. And so that's a slider joint. So like you have a drawer, you want the drawer to slide in and out, you'd use a slider joint. A cylindrical joint, where now it can move in one direction and then rotate around that same axis. So I can go up and turn there. So that's a cylindrical joint. A pin and slot joint lets it slide in one direction and rotate around a different axis. So I can pick one axis to rotate around and one axis one of the other two axes to slide on. Okay. We also have planar, which just allows that it can move anywhere on that plane. So if I have it on the z-axis, it can move on that z-axis and it can slide on the other axis. And then we have a ball joint, which just like the 2 points that we picked are stuck so it can rotate any direction that we want. So like if I say okay to a ball joint, I can make this move kind of however I want. It's just stuck those 2 corners together. If I told it to be a planar joint, now it can move this way, it can move up and down, but it can't move forward and back. Like if I click left, I can't move it side to side. I can move up and down, side to side right here, but I can't move it across the part. So I'll go back to edge joint. The most common ones we use are rigid to lock it down, Revolute to make it rotate for like a hinge or something, and sliders. So I'm going to do a Revolute joint here, say okay. So now I can click this and it can revolve. Ooh, it can kind of go all the way. So what I can do is I can turn on a contact set. So I'm going to enable a contact set. So actually I think I have to pick. So once I enable contact sets, now I have to say a new contact set, and I have to pick those components and say okay. And now it'll let them move until they hit each other. Okay, so now it's stopping there and it's stopping there. All right, that's really good. That gives us kind of really accurate animation for it. But if you have a lot of things, sometimes that can kind of slow down because it's trying to calculate where everything is going. So I can disable contact, and I can do it wherever again. Another thing I could do is right click on it and say edit joint limits. And then I can add this in, and now I can add in limits for where I want this to move. So let's say this is going to be sitting on a table or something. So it's not going to contact that, right? So it's going to open up that much. I can say okay. So now I can drag it and it'll stop there. Okay. So that's the joint limit. And so I can also just click on this or double click on that, and now I can drag it back up wherever I want it to be. I can also, in the joint limits, right click, edit joint limits. I can have what we call a rest position, and that's where it's going to go back to. So I can grab it, I can move it down, let go, and it springs back to that rest position, kind of my standard position. Okay, so those are the joints. So I'm making a joint origin, doing a joint. I could also, if I had something moved, so on this one, these are all placed right where they need to be already. So if I want to do joints, I have to kind of redo everything. So if I did a joint and I picked here on that part and here on that part, now you're going to flip it back around and everything. But they're already in the right spots. So what I could really do is just do a rigid group, pick those two parts, hit OK, and now they're stuck together. So if you've drawn things kind of how they're already supposed to be laid out, and they're not going to need to move against each other, the easiest thing to do is just to do a rigid group to join those together. That way they're still separate components, but they're not, I don't have to go through and define the joint on each one. If I wanted to have like a door here, so let me go back up and grab one of these other bodies, these old doors I'd done. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to make that a component. I want to line this up here. I'm going to do a joint. And so I don't have a hinge yet. That's actually today's lab. I'm going to click here on this one, and I'm going to click kind of right there. I'm going to make a kind of a little cheesy door. And I'm going to tell it to be a Revolute. So now when I grab, oops, see this whole thing is moving because these aren't grounded. So I'm going to click on that one on the top and tell it to ground. So now when I click on the door opens. And it does swing through everything since I don't have any limits or contact sets set up. But it's kind of too thick anyway. So another thing that you can do is go in and turn off bodies. And you can also activate components. So if you have a component, you can, so there's that one. You can click this little circle next to it and activate it. So everything else kind of grays away. But I still can't pick those things because there's other stuff in the way. So I'm going to go back up and just activate this one, and on that door, or grab that piece there, turn that off, grab that one there, turn that off. Now I can see where that is and I can grab it, drag it up, and now I can go back and add those, turn those other things back on. It's really helpful instead of just leaving things called body whatever, if you name things so that way you know what they are. So give things names so you know what those things are. Oh, see, I need this thing to come out some more also. There we go. All right. Oh, too far. Well, whatever. So there's that. So that's kind of the basics of bodies and components. From now on, when you make something, make it as a component. That way it's there. You don't have to worry about it. Components can have also other components in them. So let's say I had these boxes. But I wanted to kind of group these also. So let's say I want to do some changes to them. Oh, here's a good command we haven't gone over yet. Shell, if I pick an object and I give it a thickness, like 0.1, it hollows it out. So right now I've got each of these as a component, but let's say I want to be able to grab and move all three of those at once. Okay, well in that case, I can make a new component. So I'm going to do a new component. I'm not going to activate it. I'm just going to make it. I'm going to call it boxes. So now I've got this boxes component here. If I click on it, it has nothing. There's no bodies or anything. So I can grab these other ones and drag them down and drop them in that component. So they're still, now they're components within this other component. You can see the icon changed to the 3 boxes now because it has more than one component in it, or it has at least one other component in it. And these still have that box 1 body in it. But now I can just click here and turn on and off all 3 of those. Oh, but they're still moving independently. Why is that? It's because they're all components and they're not grounded into this. So the first one I'm going to click, I'm going to say ground. Oh. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a joint from this one that one. And I'm going to tell it to be a rigid joint. And I'm going to tell it to give me some space. So 0.2. Half inch there. And I'll do the same thing here. But now when I pick it, because I now have added joints between those, they all move. Okay? If I turn on their origins, all those are moving. If I turn on the origin for this assembly, it's staying where it was. Okay. So that's how you start grouping those things. If I had a body that was just part of this component that wasn't part of the boxes, then I could relate those boxes to that thing. And actually, if I did that here, and see if I can go to the origin. So if I go to the origin, I can have it here. So I click there, and click there. It brings the origin up there. See? So now the origin of the component is with the components that are in it. So let's turn that back off. So, but that kind of lets that go there. And now I can do a joint between here and there. And flip it. Say okay. And there it is. So now these are grounded all the way. So that's kind of how they work. So you today kind of play with the body's components. Like I said, start making everything as components. If you have things that are never going to move against each other, they can be bodies within the component. So it's all there. All right, and hope this was a good intro for this. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll work on the other stuff. All right, bye.